On the 4th of January 2024, one tweet took a woman from poverty to a millionaire overnight. I've always been too lazy to wake up and get his lunch ready, but the day he told me a colleague brought 2 spoons so he'll eat with her was the day I set an alarm for 4:50 a.m. But how did this turn this pregnant housewife into a millionaire influencer? Today we'll be taking a deep dive into the phenomenon of Mum Zee and the social implications of the death of feminism. But before that, let's thank our sponsors. Zuma Coffee. Zuma Coffee is a Nigerian homegrown coffee that is located in Abuja. So please get your coffee bags and definitely stop by for a wonderful latte. On the 4th of January 2024, a Twitter user with the handle Debbie OA, and also known as Mum Zee, made a very interesting tweet about cooking for her husband that seemed to pack up a storm. While on the surface, this tweet may seem as though it's nothing to write home about, but you would never imagine that this tweet could generate so much income from this young lady. Brands like Indomie and NPC, Lush Hair, Colgate, and many more were tweeting at this lady and giving her lots of gifts and goodies. Now, the question on every Nigerian's mind was why? Just one tweet about cooking for your husband? Why should it get so much buzz? And why is this such an important thing? And also, what does this mean for the Nigerian public? Mum Zee, full name Deborah Adebisi, is a pregnant wife and a mother to a beautiful 4-year-old daughter. So, when she woke up on the 4th January 2024, she stumbled across a tweet, and her reply was what changed her life forever. Now, this tweet was about a woman who was talking about another woman who cooked for her husband at 5 a.m. every day for his work lunch. Now, Debbie replied, showing her reluctance at first to be domesticated. But later on, when she felt her marriage was being threatened by his colleague, she took matters into her own hands and decided that she will definitely be waking up early to make food for him. Now, of course, this didn't definitely go down well with a lot of Twitter feminists, and we're going to call them Twitter feminists for now. And of course, everything seemed to spiral out of control, with these women lodging insults and attacks all over our social media page at Debbie, and the response was actually in favor of Debbie. Now, this is what one Twitter user wrote. I consider it a bit problematic when women do things like this because they are worried another woman might steal their man. You have indirectly told us that they can use food to collect your husband. If you were joking, no lele. If you weren't, yikes. While others questioned her motive for cooking for her husband, others were quite worried that a woman that was heavily pregnant was waking up at odd hours to cook for an able-bodied man. It was not deemed as love, but instead, it looked like slavery. And worse, it was another win for patriarchy and another blow to feminism. While these women seemed concerned for Debbie's well-being, Debbie, on the other hand, made things clear. She was definitely not a feminist, and she had no business with the feminism movement. I was typing, then I checked your bio and saw feminist. I just hissed and deleted. You're not worth it, replied Debbie. So what made her turn against a movement that was there to protect and care for her? And also, why is feminism collapsing on itself? And why are women at the forefront of patriarchy? To understand the Debbie phenomenon, we have to take a little bit of a deep dive into the brief history of feminism. Feminism originally started in the late 19th century as a social and political movement advocating for women's rights. The first wave around the suffragette movement focused on securing women's right to vote. The second wave in the 1960s and 70s addressed broader issues like reproductive rights and workplace discrimination. The third wave of the 1990s emphasized diversity and intersectionality. Ongoing today, feminism continues to evolve, addressing issues like gender equality, representation, and systematic oppression. Understanding the brief history of feminism allows us to know how vast and how far we've come. And of course, how much it's changed from fighting about rights to vote and discrimination in the workplace to fighting about things like cooking and not cooking for your husband. It's a far cry from what the suffragettes were fighting about. Women today advocate for all manner of social issues using the feminist movement. Some advocate for indecent dressing or what many may consider indecent dressing, and some advocate for having a lifestyle of what some others may also consider promiscuity. But the point still remains they want equal opportunities and equal ways of viewing women and men at the same level. So if we're going to judge the men, we have to judge the women. And if we're not going to judge the men, we don't have to judge the women. And one of the people that are at the spearhead of the Nigerian feminist movement is none other than Chimamanda Adichie. Chimamanda Adichie is currently fighting for the right to have the same right to kola nut rituals as a man. Here's a video explaining just that.
The things I refuse to do in the village, right? And so they say I'm a troublemaker. But I'm like, no, that's nonsense. If men do not kneel, I'm not going to kneel. Human beings, And so things like the kola nut in Igbo land, where only men can bless the kola nut. And the kola nut is so central to Igbo culture. And once in my hometown, I said, no, this is wrong. So the old man there, after I had made an impassioned case, he said, all right, we cannot have a woman bless the kola nut, but because she's made this case, we will show the woman the kola nut. So usually they break it.
Feminism has taken different forms, and it's now almost confused with misandry. And misandry, as we all know, is the oppression of men. And this has led to men speaking out and needing a voice and carving a niche for themselves that is known as the manosphere or the red pill movement. In this opinion that feminism is now the oppression of men, manosphere and the red pill movement is a counter reaction to the feminist movement. Although it's just colloquially termed and not real in the sense of feminism that has a real definition, manosphere is just the opposite of feminism, or at least it's what the people that follow the movement claim. One of the faces of the red pill movement that is quite popular and became such a big thing in 2020 was Kevin Samuels. Kevin Samuels advocated for men's rights, or at least it's what it seemed like. And he became a popular thing amongst YouTube everywhere, talking about women, talking about their bodies, and talking about the fact that they want to be promiscuous and sleep around. A lot of times he would have these women call up to him for some kind of counseling of sorts to find out why they were having it difficult in dating, and he would bash them. He literally asked women to put themselves on a scale of 1 to 10. And when women would say that they were a 7 to be polite, he would laugh and he would make very crude remarks that was borderline derogatory. But at the end of the day, women were still calling in. That is even more surprising. And the funniest thing is that the men themselves, they never saw anything wrong with it. In fact, he seemed to just keep on gaining thousands and thousands and millions of followers everywhere. I felt like he was preaching something that they felt like women needed to hear. While the feminist movement was empowering for women, it seemed like the manosphere was trying to break down all the walls and structures that feminism had done. It was trying to make women see themselves as less than, or have to fight and require to be something to earn a man. Whereas before, women just had to exist, and if they existed and they were good enough, they would definitely get a man. Or even better yet, men were not the value. But when manosphere became a thing, it made men the peak of things. And it was no longer about a woman going to school or earning a degree. It was just about her being pretty, being submissive, and being married. And in a society like Nigeria, which is still predominantly a patriarchal society, marriage is still something that is highly desired by women. So when women were kept on being told that the reason why they were single was because they were not doing this or not doing that, it was very easy for them to acclimatize to these movements. And a lot of men in Nigeria obviously wanted to be the next Kevin Samuels. We have Twitter users like Sarah Dixon and Abba. Abba, also known as John Doe, has a tribe of followers that call themselves Abafians, and they are even proud of it. It's a thing of pride to be an Abafian woman or man. And then we also have people like Emmanuel Echata and Shola that have also become such popular phenomena about the manosphere and red pill movement on Twitter. Some of their tweets have been seen as derogatory, while others have been seen as wise words from a wise man. Now, the real question is how feminism turned on its head. Before we had Twitter user Solomon Bucci, who was, or rather, was seen as an advocate for feminism. He was about women working hard, women do what men can do, and generally speaking, it seemed like a good thing until everything turned on its own, and he himself was priding Debbie for cooking. So, how did feminism lose its touch? And why don't men and women want women to be empowered in the way that it was before? Well, the simple answer is people have taken feminism to be not what it was originally meant for, or rather, so it seems. You see, Twitter in Nigeria is a different world. It's not what we know, it's not what we're used to. Everybody has an opinion, and it rarely ever goes through any filter. And it's typed on the screen, and it's there for the world to see. So, having the West go so far from feminism, having the West fight for and advocate for things that the average Nigerian man could not even fathom a woman doing, like body count. Body count became a thing. Men could have as far as 50 women that they've slept with in their lifetime, and if a woman had 10 or less, she could still be deemed as an ashawo. So we were still in that society where men dictated how things were run, and women wanted to gather the favor of men, and those women were called pick-me's, a term feminists use to shut down women that prided themselves from having the attention of men. And Debbie was quickly labeled as a pick-me. But, a pick-me or not, everything seemed to turn in her favor. You see, feminist wars have been going on Twitter. The Twitter feminists of Nigeria and the people of the manosphere and the red pill, fighting at loggerheads. And as a result, Debbie was at the crossfire. So when these feminists lodged at Debbie, calling her all sorts of names because she claimed that she was cooking for her husband at 4:50 a.m., the men swooped in to save the day. Here was an opportunity for them to make feminists look bad, and they did just that. So they started pouring in their support for Debbie, 1 naira after 1 naira, hundreds of thousands, and before you know it, Debbie was amassing almost 2.5 million naira. So initially, these Twitter heads of the manosphere movement, like Sarah Dixon and Abba, helped Debbie amass some following by reposting what she had said and giving her some sort of monetary income. Now people started to give her money because she said she didn't have a lot of things like a fridge and certain items that would enable her to cook and save things for a later time. So when they started giving her this money, immediately she used them to buy kitchen appliances. And this made people even like her more. Again, she was compared to other women who they felt would use that money to buy things like human hair and whatnot, and not things for the family. But because Debbie had used the initial 400 or 300,000 to buy things for her home and not for her personal use, people felt like she was the ideal wife. She was the Nigerian wife. She was what every man would dream of. A woman that was caring and not a woman that was in a transactional relationship. And as a result, more money started to flood in. In fact, the more money started to flood, the more people started to mock, and the more money started to flood. It became a cycle. The more the insults, the more the money, the more the money, the more the insults. But nevertheless, how did this become something that Indomie, Lush Hair, and all these big brands would start to tweet at Debbie? Well, you see, the more people started to give her money, the more these brands wanted to capitalize on the trend. Because you see, Debbie started to get a very large following overnight from these men and some women who also were at the spearhead of patriarchy in Nigeria. Now, while this was happening, Kuda saw an opportunity. So they immediately tweeted at her and aimed to double her earnings, and that is how she amassed about 2.5 million. And from there, other brands followed suit as they saw what Kuda was trying to do. Brands like Colgate, Indomie, and even NMPC, which seemed to shock us the most. And of course, the real question was, if all these brands were praising a woman for cooking at 4:50 a.m., what was that to say for where Nigerian society was going? Although we have pretended to be for this culture of equal rights for men and women, we were still at the heart a very patriarchal society. So after this became a phenomenon, of course, she made front paper news on Punch News. And people just had to point out that what these brands were trying to do by gaining traction was actually causing a lot of social repercussions. One Twitter reader wrote in response to the Punch News, "Love this for her, but not sure this should be made mainstream. There are many patriarchal men out there that will take this as a reason to bully or harass their wives, using this as a standard or excuse to carry out their own intentions. It is well, I guess." Another Twitter user wrote, "There's a pandemic of domestic violence going in the country, and somehow this was made headline worthy. Jehovah Lord, very dangerous and irresponsible thing to do. Big sorry in advance to the women whose husbands will not understand this was a choice for Debbie." Although these companies were leveraging on Debbie's popularity, they tried to mask it as though they cared about a housewife and just happy about this love story. But we all know the truth. This is still a capitalist society, and definitely they just wanted more funds. But who cares? She gains anyway. There's money, there's food. What's not to be happy about? It's a very symbiotic relationship. But the real issue is how this thing can affect a lot of women all over Nigeria. Now we have a woman that's making headline because she's cooking for her husband at 4:50 a.m. Of course, a lot of women are upset. One user on Facebook even complained that her husband was now comparing her to Debbie. A lot of men gathered support for Debbie by giving her monetary funds, but many didn't do the same for their wife. Some Facebook users also complained that their husbands were there raising funds for Debbie but have never contributed in their household. This is to say that at the surface it seemed like we were praising Debbie, but really it was for selfish interest. Just an opportunity for her to retweet and for them to gain followers. And we all know how the engagement works. Of course, since Elon Musk had made funding available for Nigerian content creators on Twitter, everybody is in it for the clicks. But the real question is, despite it being for the clicks that we all know, is Nigeria still a patriarchal society? And do we really want full-on equality for women? Or are we just pretending so that the West can like us just a little bit more?